Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner. I'm the producer of the show. We're certainly happy to have you here today. We've got a great one for you, Morgan Harper Nichols. She is the sister of Jamie Grace, the recording artist. We had Jamie on recently. She's an Enneagram 7, Jamie is, and she introduced her sister, Morgan, to the Enneagram, who is a 5. That's right. She's a 5. Really, really cool. She's an artist and poet, and she does this interactive art with her followers and fans. So they'll submit like a story, and then Morgan creates this art around the story that has been submitted, and she posts a lot of those on her Instagram, so you can check those out. She has a history in music, a songwriter, musician. Really, really talented person, Morgan is. And she's an Enneagram 5, and we talk about the challenges for the 5, how they can isolate, some of the challenges of being a 5 who already isolates in this current climate around COVID, and talk about some specific instances and some specific challenges and needs that she is coming to terms with, and just as she grows in her self-awareness. Really, really encouraging, really, really exciting. I look forward to hearing this one. I became a fan just spending just a little bit of time with her. So really inspirational, really thoughtful. If you want to check out some more episodes around Enneagram 5 work, check out Elizabeth Evans and Amanda Cook. We actually reference Amanda, who is a dear friend of mine. In this episode, we reference Amanda, and Morgan references her, I should say, or maybe I do. Yeah, I think I do. But she said she had just listened to the Amanda Cook episode. I think that's a 2-parter. So if you're a 5, or if you know a 5, definitely check that one out. Amanda really put some great language around it as well. Of course, do that after you listen to this episode with Morgan Harper Nichols. And without any further ado, let's get to the host of this show, Ian Cron.
Morgan Harper Nichols, welcome to Typology.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, and you know, everybody, just so you know, Morgan is Jamie Grace's sister. And Jamie is a 7. We recently had her on the show. She was fantastic. And today, Morgan, who is a 5. Oh man, do we love 5s around here. Couldn't be much more different than a 7.
This is true.
And yet you're best friends. You and your sister.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how we get anything done, but we do. We get a lot done. We have a lot of fun together. Yeah, I love it. I love it. At the end of the day, it's a lot of fun.
Right? And you're both artists.
Yes, we are. I feel like we do the same thing, but in very different ways. Like we both start at home, kind of in the lab, and mine's is like, okay, how can I just keep this here? And Jamie's says, okay, how can I get this out there?
Such a great insight. The 5's passion of avarice is like, how do I hold on to what little I have? That scarcity mindset.
Yes.
And the 7 who has an abundance mindset, like the world has everything in it. You know, there's more than enough of everything. That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like we'll start with an idea, and I'm like, how can we get this into a book? And she's like, how can we get it on a tour? And I'm just like, no, maybe a show or 2. So yeah, there's always,
that's right.
There's always back and forth.
You were the person who introduced her to the Enneagram. You had already pegged her as her type. And I have to say, absolutely. Not too hard to pick up, Morgan.
I was like, okay, according to the literature, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm like, I know this girl pretty well.
Right. Yep.
So yes, I did. I discovered the Enneagram, honestly, in the most cliche way, like through Instagram. I was just curious, just seeing a lot of people talk about it. And yeah, so I was like, let me just look into it just out of curiosity. And I was so enamored by, honestly, every number but the 5. I was just like, that person sounds a little dreadful. I was like, I'm not that person. But then as I looked closer, I was like, oh, I am that person. And I realized, I was like, I've kind of had sort of told myself, just, I don't know, culture, just society, like who a woman should be, who a Southern woman should be, who a Southern Black woman should be. I was like, oh no, it's it's okay to be this way. I don't have to reject that. So it took me a minute to warm up to the truth. And once I saw it, I was like, okay, yeah. And since then it's been a process of like kind of loosening into it, I guess you would
So
say.
what is a Southern Black woman type wise? What is a Southern Black woman supposed to be?
I think I just received I received a lot of messages. No one really told me specifically. I just think I would look around and I would say, okay, who are the people who seem to be successful or making progress? And I'm like, oh, well, they're more outgoing. They're these big dynamic personalities that just light up a room. And that's what people kind of expect. Even down to just little stereotypes. Like everybody thinks that, all Black people know how to dance. And I'm like, no, like I don't know how to dance. It was just little things like that I just, in hindsight, it's like, okay, yeah, some of that stuff is, obviously just stereotypes. But, in the formative years, when you're a teenager, like those things count. Like if you can't do all the little dances that everyone does and all that, I was just like, what is wrong with me? Clearly I'm not who I feel like I should be. So yeah, I feel like I've been wrestling with that for a long time. And
don't you think that all of us wrestle with who we think we should be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's just my version of it. And you're absolutely right. I think we all have a version of who we think we're supposed to be. And I feel like I'm constantly trying to get past that. It's very hard because being a five, I feel like there's so much that fives have to do to just feel safe in the world and feel like we're able to be ourselves in the first place.
Right.
So I have all of this knowledge that I've just picked up just from observing others of like, okay, I can be that type of personality if you need me to be that. But just going beneath, just to kind of survive and not let anyone in too much, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like even just with the work I do, I feel like it's just trying to like loosen out of that. That's honestly the best way I can explain.
I think it's a good exercise for everybody to maybe take some time to journal, right? And you just do one page. And that one page would say, all right, what is my idealized self that lives inside my mind that says, this is who you're supposed to be? And then write it down and then start to interrogate it, to ask it questions like, well, who said I'm supposed to be this way? And why do I feel like I need to be this way rather than who I am? Why am I not enough? Why do I think this person is enough, but I'm not? And this idealized self is the key. If I could just become that person, I'd be just the best, but it's just such a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I've exhausted myself, like physically drained myself, trying to keep up with some of these ideas because it continues even now. I mean, over the past few years, I'm an artist and I started sharing some of just my art and poetry online, never knowing how it would spread, never knowing that other people would find it. But even then, like there's this pressure that I often experience of, I'm like, do people expect me to, do Instagram stories more? Like where like showing my morning or, and I feel it's hard to explain. It's almost sort of like this pulse that I feel like exists within like the technology itself of just like post something, share something, share more and more and more. And I have to constantly like daily talk myself out of like, no, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to, you can show up in the way that you show up. And sometimes it may mean, less views or, less things like that. But at the end of the day, I have peace with it. So yeah, I still wrestle with that because I wasn't trying to be any kind of public figure. Like I had a few pieces of mine just kind of go viral and people started to find it. But my goal, I wanted to be a college professor at my alma mater, which is a small liberal arts college. Like that was the
Where did you
dream
go to
for
school?
me. And it's called Point University. It used to be called Atlanta Christian College. So I studied English there.
For English majors, I was an English major.
Yes. Oh, yes, indeed. So yes, I love that. And I started an MFA program. I didn't finish, but I was just like, yeah, this feels good. This feels good. But financially, it just ended up not working out the way I wanted it to. And, and I just ended up on this whole spin that led to where I am today. But yeah, that was the dream. I didn't really see myself, even as social media was, because I was 20 years old when Instagram launched. So I was becoming an adult with this thing. But I was engaging with it, but I didn't really feel like I want to be all up in this.
Right. And you have like 1.3 or 4 million Instagram followers, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about 15,000 people here. And how for a five, let's just talk about fives for a second, right? Like fives, known as the investigators, though I often want to call them the observers now. Your unconscious motivation is a need to gather information and knowledge as a way to fend off feelings of inadequacy and ineptitude. It's also a way of, I should say it's reflected too in your passion of avarice, right? Which is like you have a scarcity mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just trying to hold on to what little you have. It's not like you're trying to get more. It's like you're trying to contain what little you have. And you, because you're easily depleted by other people, right? Interactions with other people. It's like, I only have so many inner resources to give away to people, right? And so then when that happens, you tend to retreat into a private space and up into the mind where you feel more confident in the world. And you look to knowledge to give you what you normally would get from other people, which is love and support.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound right? You
Absolutely.
Furrowed brow there.
Yeah. That is definitely my story, and I was just thinking of the irony of it, because it's like, as a 5, I'm trying to, like, I'm okay with, I feel like I have a very narrow scope. I don't know if this is true of other 5s. I feel like I have a relatively narrow scope of hobbies and things that I like. They're all kind of in art and literature, and they all kind of stay right here. But what the irony of it is, like, well, if you become a specialist in something, like, it becomes easier for it to spread, because when someone does look at my Instagram feed, for instance, you won't see photos of me or anything like that, because I don't want to share that. So I end up just sharing this one thing, but it makes it easier to follow. So I was just like, I ended up with the,
it's so interesting, Morgan, that you have this big Instagram following. You're a 5. And I'm often, I guess I would wonder, like, all those people knowing things about you. You know what I mean? Like, over 1 million people, like, you post something and it's like, wow, I've just given away a lot of information about my inner world to other people. And I'm wondering if you find that to be some kind of a threat at some level.
Yes. With a capital T in bold font. Yes.
Wow.
I feel that threat. It's very hard, because I do feel like the expectation is there of, well, you have, a following, you're an author, all these things, like, share more of your life. Even now, like, even just trying to write for future books and things, it's harder, because it's like, okay, I know I got to go deeper somewhere. Where am I going to kind of choose to go? It's a real challenge for me. So one thing that I have been doing lately, I don't know if it's healthy or not, but when I find myself in a place where I'm like, okay, this is one of those vulnerability moments, or this is where someone may expect me to kind of go a little deeper, I kind of pull from, like, my arsenal of, like, poets and writers and people that I love. And I'd say, just listen to them. And I agree with them. I agree with that experience. So, for instance, when just earlier this summer, just the unrest that happened after George Floyd, and I didn't know what to say. And I was being asked, and I was like, I'll probably know what to say in a few months. But, when you're online, like, it's not really, it's always feel built for the slow processors. So for me, I was just like, I'm leaning on
so
Toni
glad
Morrison.
You said
and
that.
I think for the next, like, 3 days, I was just like, I'm just going to quote Toni Morrison. That's all I have for you. And the other day I did something similar with Tolkien. I was just like, this is what I think about hope and imagination right now. I can't go that way. But so that's, I've been giving myself permission to do more of that.
I was
lately.
Actually, for some reason, when we were talking, I go, I bet she loves Toni Morrison. And I was thinking about, because you kept mentioning authors, and I was like, gee, I wonder if, like, one of her favorite, because I was going to ask you what is one of your favorite books, and I thought, I bet she's going to say The Beloved.
Yes, you're right.
That's big league right there, man.
Yeah, and for me, I think I connect with, and this is why I probably always loved fiction ever since I was a kid. It's something about truth telling through storytelling that just really compels me, and I feel like it gives me permission to enter into that emotional space. I think because there's a lot of, like, the author kind of creates this, like, this womb almost for you to just kind of get in there and just sort of, like, feel whatever you need to feel. Whereas oftentimes, like, in a nonfiction setting, if someone's asking me a directly personal question, it's hard for me to kind of unlock that. Like literally right before this, I had to fill something out for a project, and they were just like, they asked the question. They said, what is your best characteristic? And that's why I was actually talking to my sister before. I literally called her and asked her, I said, Jamie, what is my best characteristic? I don't know. Like, how does one figure out what their best characteristic is? However, if they'd asked me what fictional character did I connect with the most, that answer probably would have revealed more of my characteristics. So yeah, there's something about fiction, and then even broader, just art in general, that I really do feel like it allows me to kind of like feel into my emotions in a way that makes me feel safe to do so.
That's interesting. Yeah. I wonder, I remember working with a five one time, and he was so locked up and was having a hard time accessing what he was feeling. And I remember, because in the process of me asking a question, I remember him trying to think his way to his feelings. And I said, don't think your way to your feelings. Use your imagination to get there. And that's kind of what I hear you saying. It's like, as opposed to using like your mind and your thoughts, you're sort of using imagination, which is more language of the soul, which can help you connect to where you really are in your feelings.
Absolutely. Imagination is one of my favorite words. And one of my other favorite writers, Joan Didion, she said that, like, I write to know what I feel. And I just, for the first time I was like, okay, there's my permission to just not know what I feel first, because I don't know. So that is something that I hold dear, because it's very intimidating, I think, for a lot of fives to just come out with that emotion. And it's hard in times where, that are uncertain, where, especially if you're a public figure as a five, it's like people are going to expect you to say something in some capacity. So yeah, I'm just trying to lean into that permission to kind of lean into the imagination a little bit more.
It's interesting. People tend to have a stereotype of fives that, they're all scientists or math teachers, or, people who are constantly leaning into that discursive analytical mind, right? But that's not true. Some of our best artists have been fives, and partly because you have such powerful skills around observation. So you observe things. You can detach and observe things, people, objects, and your insight into those people or objects is very, very powerful, right? And so tell people what it is that you do as an artist, so people have a handle on your place in the world.
Yes, so I make digital art and I write poetry, and I combine the two. And the writing comes more just, I don't feel like it's that different than a lot of other writers. I mean, I use a notes app, I use a journal, like it kind of goes here and there, different places. But the art is a weird thing, because I never thought of myself as an artist. I wasn't one of those kids that could draw a lot of, super in depth, like draw anatomy or something like that. I wasn't a kid like that, but I was always moved by color. And I mean, even now, like where I'm sitting, I can just see this tree, and I've literally been painting these shades of green and yellow in this tree for like the past 2 weeks, because I just love it that much. I'm like, there's a million colors there. It's not 5 colors, it's a million. Like, let's just sit with that for all of eternity. So I love color. So I got an iPad a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I just started messing around with it. And I just fell in love with digital apps like Adobe Sketch and Procreate, and just playing around with it, and really just obsessed with color. Because you do kind of run into some limitations with like physical paints, because one, you can only buy so many, and I was a broke 20-something. I can't just go buy endless paint. But I'm like, this iPad thing, I just have to charge it, and all the colors are there, just colors I don't even know, and I can just sit here and mix them and play with them. So for me, color is the kind of way that I kind of enter into emotion. And so what I started doing was, I was like, I enjoy making art, and I enjoy connecting with people. I think people like art. So let's see if I can make art inspired by what people share with me and their emotions. So on Instagram in 2017, I invited people to submit their stories anonymously. It could literally just be one sentence or their whole life story. And I would just try to reflect the emotion of that story through art. Through my very simplistic art. It's not like, enjoy being able to connect with people that way and be able to make art that way. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And yeah, a lot of my work is still inspired by DMs and emails that I receive. And I respond with colors, and the poetry kind of comes out of the painting.
Do you find that the barrier of technology makes it more possible for you to relate to other people? Because it's like you have control over how much interaction you have, versus, I got a million people in my room. It's like, no, I have sort of a safety net. How is this? The boundary that technology sets up that protects me from being overwhelmed and drained by a relationship.
Yes, those clearly defined boundaries of the technological device. That is significant for me. This year, I actually removed social media off my phone and I only use it on my iPad at my desk. So I've even gone deeper into that of just like, okay, this is a space where I connect with others. And when I'm away from this space, I am resting, I am getting filled back up again so that I can return to that space. And yeah, it's a very good space for me. I enjoy that. I struggle with like liminal social spaces.
Yeah, what's it like for you to go to a party? What happens to you when you go to a party?
Oh, well, one thing is I do love food. So there's that tends to be the motivator for social. Just being honest. And that's the thing my sister and I really have in common. We're both foodies. Like we can talk food all day. So that is sometimes a motivator. I'm like, okay, well, they're really good cooks. So that'll be good. But yeah, I don't do a lot of social events.
Do you dread them?
I don't do a lot. I do. Especially if there's a number of people. Now I can do, for instance, so I have a little one, he's 18 months old. So now we're getting to that point, eventually it's like, okay, well, he's got to have friends. Like we got to talk to people, we got to go do things. I've just got to
go meet other parents.
Yeah. And I've discovered when there's one other family, that doesn't drain me a lot in the sense of like, okay, there's this family and we're a family and we're just kind of connecting. But when that number multiplies, it's just harder for me to feel like I'm giving anyone or anything really adequate attention. And what I'll end up doing is I'll end up kind of hanging back a little bit. I'll busy myself with like, oh, someone needs to help clean up the kitchen. I'll just go do that because it's easier for me to just do something with my hands. And for instance, and I even see that with music because I traveled as a musician for many years. I was like, how did I do that? And I always knew how to sing, but I wasn't able to perform until I learned how to play guitar because that guitar was a physical shield between me and others. And it created like this sort of like, I don't know, my little space of just like, okay, this grounds me here. And whatever happens over there is just what happens over there. But when that guitar got taken away, it was very challenging for me. So yeah, I don't gravitate toward a lot of social events. I'm grateful that I have a family that I'm close to and who will listen to my random thoughts on things and entertain my random thoughts. And I listen to them as well. And yeah, I'd feel like I have I wouldn't say a small group of friends, but I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, that's just sort of what my experience has been like with social large groups. It's definitely not something I gravitate toward.
Right. So this idea of scarcity that there's only so much, so many resources I have that I have to protect my privacy, my personal information, my material resources, money. It's like there's just not enough. And that then drives the five to have a fixation on independence. Like I just have to remain independent because there's just not enough out there. So I got to hold on to what I have so that I could be self-sufficient. Right. Is that part of your experience?
Yes. It makes it a little challenging too when I'm wired for art, I guess, because I feel like so much of art is about collaboration. And that's been a struggle for me because when I'm in settings of collaboration, I tend to just kind of let other people just speak their ideas and I don't really assert myself. And then the downside of that is I end up walking away feeling like, oh, what did I just sign myself up for? Like this project ended up being so much bigger than it had to be. I wish I could have just done it by myself. So yeah, that is sort of my natural inclination is to figure out how can I do this by myself? Because honestly, I don't always, and I feel like I'm getting better at it because I'm at least aware of it now. I don't always feel safe to sign up for something with others because I know that I don't really have that I don't naturally assert myself in situations. Especially if there's conflict, I'll have like a whole rebuttal in my head, but I'm not confrontational out loud. I'm very confrontational in my head. Like I've got plenty of thoughts and theories on everything, but I don't always share them out loud. So yeah, with my art and my work, especially, I try to find out like, how can I do this myself? And that's probably why I was drawn to even doing digital art. Cause I'm just like, this is my iPad. This is my space. Because even when, so it sounds kind of silly, but I remember even being a kid, like sometimes I would love to just write stories, and it would just, I'm a preacher's kid, and we would just be sitting around after church, and I would just like doodle little characters in the story, and like a grown up would come up behind my shoulder and say, "What are you drawing?" And I'm just like, doesn't matter. Like, can I just kind of be in this space? Like, clearly I'm focused. So I think what I love about the iPad is just like, it looks like someone's working, it's not very, I don't know. I don't think people don't really see someone sitting there with an iPad and think artists.
Right.
I don't like, there are artists who can go and sit, by the ocean and paint. I don't think I could, for me at least, I don't think I could do that without thinking like, okay, who's gonna come up and wonder what I'm doing? And it sounds so awful to say, but it's just it's hard for me to figure out how to be in a lot of those spaces. So I feel like that's something I'm still working through.
Was that, I mean, a lot of fives as children say, I loved school because I was learning a lot. I was gaining knowledge and information, but I felt socially awkward. It was just hard for me to know what other people wanted of me and how much energy did I have to give away. And I always felt sort of separate from the crowd. Like I was observing the crowd, but not participating in what they were doing. What was childhood like for you?
Yeah, so we were homeschooled preachers' kids. So that kind of added to it in the sense that I wasn't around a lot of kids every day. So I got very used to just, oh yeah, sometimes you see other kids, sometimes you don't. And it didn't bother me terribly much. I will say that in my teen years, one thing that's interesting that kind of happened in my teen years is that was when I discovered internet forums where you could write fantasy stories and things like that. And that's where I honestly started to make friends. And I was okay with it. It affected me that I felt like an outsider in the real world. But at the same time, I felt like I still know those kids' usernames. Like I probably know more about them and I still remember their stories. And the forum, it was called Young Writers Society, and it's like a sword like behind the logo. It was a good place for me. I really enjoyed that, and I felt close to the other young writers on there, and but I think I feel more okay with it now. But back then there was definitely a level of like, okay, but don't tell anyone. Like, I don't think this is cool with everyone else. Writing like, role-playing fantasy stories inspired by Lord of the Rings. And I don't think other kids care about that. So I will say that that's one thing that I'm a bit jealous of with the younger generation, like Gen Zers. I feel like it's a little bit more cool to kind of be into nerdy culture and geek culture. Like they have more, they've got YouTube channels and hashtags. Like we didn't have that stuff. It was just getting started when I was a teenager. So yeah, I had a sense that I was different, and I was okay with the fact that I may not have a lot of friends, but I definitely did not feel okay with talking about that.
Yeah. So let me let's jump down a little deeper. You ready? I'm going to get into the personal questions.
I'm ready.
Are you in therapy right now? You are. Okay. And what kinds of issues are you working? What drove you into therapy recently?
The pandemic. I had, because for me, I felt okay with not being out and engaged in the world, but it started to get to a point where I would go to just say Target or something like that, and suddenly eye contact just felt like a lot. And it was like, okay, I could do that. Like, yes, it takes me like an awareness to kind of be out in the world, but yeah, I was feeling more fragile, maybe is the word. And I think just, the uncertainty of the times definitely impacts it too. It's just like, okay, yes, I'm wearing this face mask, but maybe I feel a little too good behind it, type of thing. Yeah. Like maybe I feel a little too okay with being removed. And I was just realizing that I was not responding to text messages. People who I care about, people who care about me, I'm just like, well, I mean, we're not seeing anybody. Like, what's the matter? And it's like, oh, but connection still matters. And yeah, just feeling some restlessness with that, honestly, of just like, I'm not sure this is okay. And I'm not sure if I even would have really noticed it that much had it not been for having a little one. I think that, I mean, he's very energetic and he loves people as well. So for me, it was very much so like, I've got to work on this, even if it's just for him, because I definitely don't want him to grow up thinking like we just stay shut off from the world and we don't connect with other people. It's like, yes, this big, scary, traumatic pandemic happened and it affected a lot of us. But at the same time, like, we do have to continue to connect with the world. So I was feeling like it was starting to get a little too easy to just kind of slip away,
Yeah.
and just kind of stay back. So yeah.
It's interesting. I think fives, like fours, can easily slide into the despair abyss. They can become, if they're, they may start to read, since you're a reader, I'll share this, they can sort of fall into that Albert Camus place, that sort of existential despair. It's interesting that the 4 and the 5 are at the bottom of the Enneagram. And then they have the widest gap between 4 and 5, right? Mm-hmm. It's the only gap on the Enneagram that's larger than any other gap, right? Between the 4 and the 5. Makes sense. 4s are more attuned to their feelings than any other number. 5s are least attuned to their feelings than any other number. But there's this huge hole in between them. And both 4s and 5s, many of whom are artists, can fall into that despairing abyss. I mean, we talk about Joan Didion, right? I don't know if Joan Didion's a 4 or 5. She's one or the other. She's probably a 4 of the 5 or a 5 of the 4. I'm not sure, right?
Yeah.
but falling into that depressive, existential, despairing abyss. They're on the precipice of it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not, careful, they can fall down and into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds a little bit of what you're describing. You're trying to move away from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just be more aware of it too, I think, because I know that, we talked about the independent thing. I feel like I tend to be okay with just being by myself. And I know that that's not wrong by itself, but it's like, we need other people. And I've been struggling with that. Like, it just being totally transparent this year has just been like, okay, but now we're seeing, like, there's this, I'm misquoting it, I'm paraphrasing it, but there's this Khalil Gibran poem where he talks about, let there be space in your togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh, yes. I love that. But at the same time, it's like, even in that space though, that's not a distance. Like, it shouldn't just be a permanent distance from other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the poem, he actually described it as pillars, as the separation are pillars. And I was like, oh, like, yeah, they're holding together. And it's not like me over here, this vaporous
right.
soul all by myself. It's like, no, we're even separate. Like, we're holding together. We're holding up together. So yeah, that's just something that I try to remember a lot. And, during this time, I've been reading a lot. And I did have this moment, like one word that I always sometimes have a hard time with S05 is community, build community. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to build community. It just seems like such an effort. And I don't know how to do that. However, I had this thought one day. I don't remember what I was reading, but I was looking in the back of the book at the bibliography at all the writers that the person had referenced. And I just had this thought. I was like, oh, this is community. This is a community. All of these sources together, they build on top of one another. They lift up each other's words. And I just found so much peace in that, of just like, oh, I even in those spaces where I'm not quite sure how to connect with others, there are places where I can start in my own way to give me the courage to re-enter the world, if that makes sense.
Right.
So one thing I've been doing on Instagram, for instance, I'm super proud of myself. I just started it this week because I don't really post a lot of my personal life, but I'm like, I do want people to know, like, I'm a real person. I'm not just like, I'm not an Instagram account. I'm a person who happens to have an account. So one thing I've been doing is I've been sharing a lot of my sources. I've been sharing a lot of people who speak to me, and I've been intentionally focusing on just lesser known voices. And I've been intentionally sharing the people whose book or whose page you may not have heard of. And the response has been really good.
Yes.
And people have responded and said, like, thank you for sharing that. I just discovered this new poet, this new artist. And to me, that feels like kind of closing that gap.
It does.
That
And,
makes sense.
it's hard for a 5 to do that, because information is power, and giving information and knowledge away, is hard for 5 sometimes,
Yes.
And so, that's, you're practicing what, all of us should do with our passion, which is going against the grain of our passion. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to hold on and hoard this information, I'm going to assume that the world is a place of abundance where there's plenty of information to go around, and I don't have to worry about sharing what I know with other people, because there'll always be more to know.
Yeah.
The world is abundant, right? And so, yes,
such a great exercise.
Yeah, and it's it is hard for 5s. They tend to be share information on a need to know basis, but just to give it away out of this mindset of, no, there's so much to know, is like, goes against the grain of avarice, the passion, right? Because at the end of the day, your passion is the source of your suffering.
Yeah.
I have a question. You're talking about facing this desire to pull back, and I'm just wondering, the five, in order to avoid needing, they have to suppress their needs, right? Minimize your needs in order to avoid connecting with other people. I'm just wondering, during this season, what needs have arisen in you that you might be suppressing?
Mm. Gotta really think about that one.
It's interesting that you are, because fives, it's been interesting watching you in this conversation, because oftentimes fives, when you ask them a question, take about 5 seconds longer than other people to answer. And you've been streaming pretty hard, which is not a bad thing. It's just, it's not what I normally experience with fives. You ask a five a question, normally they go 5 minutes, 5 seconds of silence, and then they answer. It's because they have so much information in their head. They're trying to, the search engine is looking for the answer.
Yeah.
But there are so many files, so many folders.
Yeah.
And he just asked you about a feeling.
Yeah.
About needs. And then you went, and then you sort of looked.
So there's this, there. I'm really thinking about it. And so to back up to what you just said, Ian, about, I have noticed that. I was like, why do I just go in right away? And I do think that there's something for me. I feel like I process my thoughts sort of as I go. And that's actually my creative process as well. So I don't know if that's different than other fives or not, but there's a million things going on in my head at the same time, but I'm just like, if I don't speak now, I may never speak. I think that it's like, if you don't start talking, like, you're going to be like, well, this is, but there's also that version of it. And then, I think that might be it. I think I've trained myself, like, just stop overthinking it, because you'll actually literally never say anything, like I'm doing now with this needs question. So I just pulled up the needs list that my therapist gave me.
Your therapist gave you a needs list.
Yeah.
I love that for a
That's
five.
awesome.
Okay, good. Let's hear about
It's very helpful. So if you Google needs list, it comes up. And I think it's the Center for Nonviolent Communication shared it. And I'm looking now, and I'm just like, what need am I? And I think I'm suppressing, and I've suppressed recently the inclusion is the word on here. And that when I read that, I just felt that in my gut. I think because I created my creative practice, and which I talk about that a lot, because I feel like even outside of work, it's just a huge art making. It's just a huge part of who I am and how I find peace. And I created that out of feeling like I hadn't been included in previous versions of trying to be a creative in certain circles and things. And I felt very left out, and it was very, well, fine, I'll just go off on my own. And I think that I do struggle with addressing when I want to belong in a group, because it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, am I giving someone too much of myself to say, like, I want to be in your group? Like, even now, as I say that, I my whole body like tenses.
Yes.
Up.
In fact, I was just about to say, and this is why I love that we're on YouTube, is that people, if you were an 8, you'd have entirely different body energy. But as a 5, you have one kind of energy, 2s have another. Ones, I can just almost sometimes spot it in the body language, even the choice of clothes, everything, And one of the things I picked up just as you began talking around the word belonging, that this feeling energy arose in you. Like your voice changed, it got softer and more tender. And it seemed to me that you were moving into a much more immediate emotional space. So what, does something about belonging deeply touch you?
I think so. I think it's just, I got so used to, as a kid, not belonging, being the weird homeschooled preacher's kid, not fitting in, that I was just like, yeah, that's just who I am in the world. That's just who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be over here, out there, just never in what's going on, just kind of on the outside of it. And so we grew up in Atlanta, and there's a perimeter that goes around the city, and you have inside the perimeter and outside the perimeter. We literally grew up just outside the perimeter. And I've thought about that before. Just like, I always felt like I was just on the outside, and I literally physically grew up just on the outside. Like, the street where we lived on was the last stop for the transit, like the train. I mean, the bus for the city. It was just at the edge.
Oh my gosh, there's a poem here. It's so obvious. Entitled Perimeter. I mean, that
I never thought of that.
poem.
And there, again, I'm trying not to reference so many writers, but it's very hard not to. Another writer, Howard Thurman, the theologian, writes about the growing edge. And I think Parker Palmer wrote about it as well. And I just sat with those words for a very long time. I was like, I feel like I'm at the edge. And hearing that growing edge was very healing for me, I think, because it's like, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll just belong with other people who are at the edge. I don't know if
that's true.
I don't know if and again, it's all how I perceive it, but it's like, I don't know if those people over there that I consider as the in, and I don't know if this is healthy or not, but the people that I see as like the in group or the that I can't quite get there, maybe that's just bringing up the sense of belonging that I desire, but maybe there are other people that I will feel that sense of belonging with, if that makes sense. Because I think I ignore that one.
Yeah, I think fives often find other fives, and they because there's the experience of outsiderness, of apartness, and so fives often will be most social with other fives. Then we had a panel of fives on once, and it was so powerful because when they were together, they couldn't stop talking. You know what I mean? But I know a lot of those people individually apart from that panel, just in the regular world, and that is not who they are. But they had found their tribe, and they were talking about books, and they were talking about ideas and experience. I had that experience. It's like, there's some, it's like the book, The Outsiders, S.E. Hinton, it's like, find the other outsiders, and form a community with them.
Yeah, I am 100% sort of getting to that point. I think I don't have a lot of, I have a few fives in my internet life, which I'm so grateful for, and I'm working on trying to find some in real life. But just the concept of realizing that being an outsider, feeling like an outsider, perceiving oneself as an outsider doesn't necessarily mean that you're alone in that outsiderness. I think that's sort of probably where I'm needing to get to. Right. I'm just like, okay, it's like, now you've addressed that. Okay, yeah, maybe you think a little differently, but now it's time to find the other people who sort of are maybe have had similar journeys. Like, I remember finding out one time about it's kind of loosely an art movement that they just sort of use this name, outsider art. And that's just people who they were not a part of any type of like art group or anything. Like, you have like a New York group, and it wasn't anything like that. They were just people in the fringes, oftentimes the fringes of society, margins of society, creating art. And I remember finding out about that term and looking it up one day. And I literally, when I Googled outsider art, I literally felt tears welling up in my eyes, even just looking at the art. And I was just like, yeah, you can feel that outsiderness. You can feel that different space. And I just had a moment where I was like, you know what, I'm not like a professional artist, I'm not a gallery artist, but I was like, if anyone remembers anything that I made, I'm like, I want to be associated with these people.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
They're the artists that I connect with. So yeah.
So as we head toward the end of this interview, I want to know, just I think this would be helpful for people to know, as you think about fives in general, what is it they really yearn for at the sort of at the deepest level? What is it you want? What is it you, at the core of your person, you're like, I yearn, I pine for this?
Yeah. I know one word that I love and I get excited about, and I think it is connection. Connecting back to my body, connecting to other people around me. And I think I just get stuck a lot of times because maybe I don't connect in the way that, again, like I feel like I'm supposed to or whatever. And I feel like it's not quite, then I'll kind of get in this whole like, oh, maybe I never will connect. But I think beneath that, I still crave that. Again, one more quote, and I'm done with quotes. I'll stop quoting other people. But Ian Foster, this quote, only connect, live in fragments no longer. And I just, that's
say that again, because it was very powerful.
So
only connect, live in fragments no longer.
Oh,
and it's a beautiful. The longer quote actually is very beautiful. And it's those two parts that really stood out to me. And I think it's, oh yeah, that I don't want to feel fragmented, separate. Like, I'm just a different kind of pillar in the structure, but I'm still a pillar with all the other types, all the other people out there. It's just, I don't want to be off. I don't think at my core being, I want to be off in the distance.
Right. You want to be part of life.
Yeah. I want to be part of life. And for me, when I am in that, even when I am in that observational state and I am kind of like pulling back, even then, like that's still connection for me. So I still, I enjoy being able to observe and listen to other people's conversations. I enjoy that. So I think at the core, it's connection and
an emotional connection, or just is that?
I think that one might be a bit.
But is that a long?
Bit of a stretch?
Is it a long?
I don't know. I think. I mean, one word that comes up is just meaningful connection.
Great.
I think of just, sometimes like, because I feel like I've had, for instance, people who, like a professor, for instance, who just changed the course of my life with some wise words that he said. I have this one professor like that, but I don't really sense we had an emotional connection. I feel like it was more of like an intellectual, maybe it was emotional connection. I don't know, but I didn't really perceive it that way. For me, it was just more of like, wow, like you shared your, it was the knowledge that he shared with me. Like, yeah, here's what you could do as an artist. And I was like, whoa, what, really? And I took that and ran with it. So yeah, I don't know. I think connection comes in many ways that are meaningful. And sometimes it is emotional connection.
Yeah.
So.
What's one of your favorite movies?
Ooh, it's an old one. It's a kid's one.
Okay.
Little Princess. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it.
No, I haven't.
It's a rare, I'm trying to remember the director. He's directed something else that is more, that I think more people would know, but it's based on a book, and it's a little girl who, who has to get sent to this boarding school, and she's just very different from all the other kids. And wow, now that I'm speaking of the story, but she literally finds home in the attic of the. This
is too good to be true.
Oh my gosh.
Of the boarding school, and they create this completely other world.
They do.
And I think
it makes me think of another guest we have had on the show, Amanda Cook, and she talked.
Yeah, she talked about that
attic of her mind. Yeah.
Oh my God.
As I said it, I thought of that interview. I was like, I can't believe it. I haven't watched that movie in years, and I'm thinking of the plot. And yes, so it's just about her. I don't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen, but she definitely has like an awakening experience of who she really is, and she finds out that she's so much more than this
in an attic
girl at a boarding school.
So this is a really great way to end, because oftentimes I'm always trying to ask people about things like movies and books, and when I'm doing a typing interview, instead of going, do you tend to do this? It's like, no, I was going to go, what's your favorite movie? Or what's your favorite book? Or tell me about a time you were most moved. In other words, trying to come in sideways versus through the front door, their intellect. It's like, no, tell me about these things, because that might actually help type you. Yeah. That's what the person's there for. That way. And as you described that, I was like, this would not, if I had asked that question at the beginning of this interview, I'd have been like, okay, we can go now.
You got me. You got me. Like, well done on that.
I mean, that is classic.
Yeah.
So classic. And the end of the story is the little girl finds out about this whole other dimension of who she is. That she's much more than the girl in the attic, is what it sounds like. I've not seen the film. And that new narrative, that new self-knowledge changes everything for her.
Oh yeah. And she integrates with the rest of the students, and they kind of all have this like liberation moment. And it's just so beautiful. But yeah, she spends most of the movie ascending and getting away from all the chaos. And
so beautiful.
Yeah. I need to go watch
All right, Morgan, tell everybody how to find out about you, so that you can have all that many more people following you and making you feel depleted.
Oh my goodness. Well, you are all welcome to join me on the interwebs. My name is Morgan Harper Nichols on Instagram, and Twitter, it's Morgan H. Nichols. And I have a podcast too, where I just kind of share thoughts on
What's
things.
the name of it?
Yeah, it's Morgan Harper Nichols. I couldn't think of a name, so
that's a good name.
That's good.
You're the brand, so you might as well call it what it is. And then tell everybody about the name of your book of poetry.
Yes, it's called All Along You Are Blooming. It's a hardcover, full color book of poetry and art.
And that sounds like a Toni. That sounds like a Toni Morrison.
I love her so much.
Or Maya Angelou too.
She's another. Yeah, Maya is another. I would say that as in my creative process, seriously, I feel like it's like Maya on one shoulder and Toni Morrison on the other.
That's not a bad
and
company.
It's just like, which way are gonna, pull from today?
You want to
So,
hear a crazy Toni
love
Morrison
them both.
story? I mean, a crazy
Yes.
Maya Angelou story. Okay,
Oh,
I'll tell
yes.
you one. So she and I were speaking at something together, and she came with a sort of a retinue, right? And she had a security guy who also was her nephew. She had like two or her agent was there, her literary agent was there. I mean, et cetera, right? They all came together.
Yeah.
And at a certain time, I don't know how it happened. It ended up just being the two of us in the green room alone. And I was working on a memoir at the time, and she said to me, she had these big, big glasses on, like really big glasses, right? And I can say this now because she's not alive any longer, but she was in a wheelchair with oxygen, but she refused to go out on stage in it. And she actually had in her writer, when she arrived at the venue, nobody could see her enter the building in a wheelchair or with her oxygen, right? And then when she came time for her to speak, she just went out on stage without any of that and sat and was brilliant without notes for an hour, and then walked off stage, immediately got into her wheelchair, oxygen went back in, she went out to the bus. Now we're in the room together, and she asked me what I'm working on. And of course, how do you tell someone who wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings that you're working on a memoir? It's like, even though that's a work of fiction, it's a memoir, right? And I'm like, oh boy, I'm embarrassed to say it. And when I told her I was working on a memoir, she grabbed my arm like talons. She just gripped my arm, and she looked up at me, and she has a very deep voice, and she goes, "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child." I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? And she's singing to me in the green room just spontaneously. And I felt like it was a benediction, that she was saying a blessing over me.
Wow.
And it was so moving and so confusing at the same time. It was just overwhelming to my head that Maya Angelou is holding my forearm in this tight grip and singing Motherless Child over me. And it was incredibly moving and powerful.
Wow. That's all I have to say.
It was a moment.
That's a moment of a lifetime.
Yeah, It was a moment of a lifetime.
Yeah, that I'm sure you'll sit with forever. You'll be unpacking that for all of time.
Yep, it was very, very powerful. Very powerful. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was such a delight. And I'm going to get you and Jamie on this show because I want to see that 7 and 5 doing their thing together.
Totally.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty intense.
Well, peace to you and to all the people that you love in this life. And, I can't wait to see if your life is like the little princess.
Coming down from the attic.
Coming down from the attic. Yeah.
Yes, and kudos to Amanda for that as well.
Yes.
That was her episode. I listened to it multiple times.
Right? Yeah, it was a good one.
So,
it was a good one. Well, listen, Typology listeners, we love you. We are so happy that you are our community. You're our family. And so from Anthony and I to you, much love. And remember the words of the great Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Until next time.